Good afternoon. Welcome to this February 4th, 2021 Lunchtime Topic. If this is your first time joining, Lunchtime Topics are the Creative Coast free weekly educational program featuring area experts on topics of innovation, design, tech, and professional development for entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. I'm Kate Lance, the Director of Programs at the Creative Coast. And today's guest, we're so excited, is Blakely Scott, who is a user experience designer at Wells Fargo. A little bit about Blakely. She has certifications in Scrum Master and UX design, and she received her BFA in interactive design from the Savannah College of Art and Design here in Savannah. She has over 10 years of experience designing web and mobile products at the enterprise level. She's passionate about tackling design challenges with creativity and inclusivity. We love that. And her work is driven by the idea that design belongs to everyone and should not be just created in a vacuum. So outside of work, she enjoys creating AR filters, animations, and creative writing. So today, Blakely is going to share about specifically data-driven UX. And we know that quantitative and qualitative research is very important to guiding experiences and meaningful experiences, but it can be, difficult to convert those results from the research into design decisions. So what Blakely's going to talk about is how to create better informed designs through data analytics. Without further ado, welcome, Blakely. I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. That was wonderful. Hey, so yeah, as Kate said, I am Blakely Scott. I'm a user experience designer at Wells Fargo. And as she said, we're going to be talking about data-driven UX today. So we're going to be looking at how we can collect data on our users and analyze it and translate that into better experiences for them so that we can make sure that they're having a great user experience and that those experiences are supported and backed up by data. This is important because it helps us answer hypotheses about questions that we may have about our users. It helps us identify patterns in their behavior so that we can see things that we may not see by just, having our expectations. And it also helps us get that data so that we can make sure that we're prioritizing fixes and features in the most efficient way possible so that we can make sure that we're not putting effort into things that our users are not going to find valuable. And so I have a quick question before we get started, and I know it's a Zoom, so it might be a little bit trial and error, but how many of you had coffee this morning? You can just put it in the chat. I think we have a chat, correct? And you can just indicate whether you had coffee or maybe you had tea. I'll just look. Hi, Gabby. Thank you so much. Okay, we got tea. What else? Anyone else? Coffee. Okay. Coffee. Great. Coffee. Okay. So it looks like we're about 80% coffee and 1 tea. So that's good. So I just collected a little bit of data on y'all, on my audience, and now I'm able to feel a little more relieved because I know that everyone's caffeinated, so we're ready to start the day, and that's great. And that's what we're really going to be looking into today, is just how we can collect data on our users so that we can make informed decisions when we're creating experiences for them, because they're our ultimate audience. So how can we collect the data? Well, we have, sorry, my PowerPoint is getting a little bit ahead of me. So we have quantitative methods, and those look like top searches, repeat search queries, we have page views, unique visitors, heat maps are common, crash reports, session durations, exit rates, bounce rates, and then browser types. So quantitative data is just data that's statistical and numerical. Usually it's collected in the background by analytics tools like Google Analytics or any kind of analytics that you may have on your app or your website. And they can be really useful because it helps capture that digital movement. So you can see how your users are flowing through your products. They're also fairly customizable, so you can look at different interactions. If you want to study them, you can create listeners to make sure that people are interacting with those parts of your product. And then they allow for that collection over time. So you're able to collect mass amounts of data and then look at different time periods of, what you may want to look at by month or by time of day. You can get really granular with that. So those are some of the benefits of those quantitative methods. And some of the cons for that type of collection can be that it does require some upfront configuration. So if you don't have IT or yourself willing to set that up initially, then it can be hard to make sure that you have it. And depending on your product, it can also be expensive. So you have to take that into consideration. And then it may not answer all the deep and burning questions that you really have about your product. So it's just something to be aware of, that you may have to end up doing some other methods to get more context around what you're looking at. And so we also have qualitative methods. And those are user testing, focus groups, we have surveys, user interviews, and then some of my favorites are actually like online forums and social media. I think those are often overlooked because, it's just not common to think about that as a qualitative method, but you can find some really valuable data on your users by just going into social media and seeing what people are saying about it. I also like to go on Reddit and things like that. I've done that before. I call it like guerrilla research, where you go in and you see what people are saying. They're candid online. They're going to tell you what you think. So you can really find some good insights onto what they're looking for on those places. And then product reviews are also really valuable because people often put exactly what they think about yours, whether it's a 1-star or 5-star, they love it or hate it. They're probably going to even give you some feature recommendations. So that can be really valuable when you're looking at collecting that data. And some of the benefits are that it is cheap. So for the most part, the only cost is time, time for going through everything and time for getting your participants. So that's your main cost there. And then anyone can do this. So anyone can make a survey, anyone can do user testing. You don't have to have a skill set of data analysis and be a data scientist. You can really get into this, and all you really need to do is just talk to people and do your research. And then it really adds valuable context because it kind of adds color to those numbers that you may see. It's a set of opinions, concepts, and experiences versus being numerical and statistical. So you're going to have a little more context and descriptions when you're looking at different data that you've collected through these methods. Some of the cons can be that, again, it's time consuming because that main cost is time. So you have to make sure if that's not your primary role, you have to make sure that you're allowed to have time to go and do this properly, and that you can get a really good sample group of people, because you don't want to just interview like one user or test it with one user. You need to make sure that you have a good group and make sure that you're able to get their time and get access to them. Sometimes that can be a problem if you're not able to get access to your end users for whatever reason. And so my favorite ultimate method is really just having that quantitative and qualitative together, because I think that's going to give you the most well-rounded data that you can possibly have, because you have your numbers and then you also have your context. So I think that that's probably the best method, best ultimate method that you can have. Yeah, because it's going to give you the most context. And so once you've collected that data, how do you translate that into design? So here's a little example of if you had some Google Analytics and you had a search bar on your website, and let's say for this that it's a coffee shop, you may see that your top 4 searches are caramel latte, how to pay, ordering online, and then open. So what can this tell us? Well, if you see something like caramel latte, that's a specific product that we are offering. So we know that this is pretty popular if it's the top result for all of our products. So maybe we want to highlight this with a banner image or a hero and make sure that it's linked from our homepage so that we can make sure that this popular drink is accessible easily. And then if you see something like ordering online, if you don't already have this feature, perhaps it's something that people are wanting and looking for. So this may be a possible feature addition. Or if you already have it and people are searching for it, then you may want to look at if the path is clear for them and they're able to follow it easily. Because if they're searching for it, then maybe they're not able to navigate easily. So you want to make sure that they are able to access that. If you see something like how to pay, that's kind of vague, and it may say it might be related to the online ordering of how to pay for their stuff online, or they may be looking for what kind of credit cards you take, like Amex or Visa. So this may require a little more investigation on what's confusing them about the payment option. It'd be a good idea to take a little deeper dive into what exactly is confusing about that process of how to pay. And sometimes you'll see just really, really vague search terms of open. That could mean a couple different things, but you can maybe infer by looking at some of the other lower search terms. Maybe you see hours, opening, closing, and that will help you know by contrasting those different results if we need to clearly list our hours of operation so that people are able to access that information easily. And so again, with a different example, we have some quantitative data on repeat search queries. And I really love repeat search queries because I think they tell a really nice story about what your users are looking for and maybe their frustrations and what they're not able to find. So we can see here they have caramel, and then they were kind of vague about it, and then they went in a little more detailed caramel latte. So they're looking for the caramel latte. And then they put order caramel latte, so they're adding a little more detail, and they're clearly not able to find the order option for ordering it. And then finally, with the most detail, you can see they put pick up order caramel latte. So maybe they found the order, how to order a latte in store, but they really were looking for a pickup order. So this can really help us understand kind of their journey and what they're looking for. So maybe we need to look at this and make sure that it's easier for them to navigate to this option and complete the order process. So I have this, which is about bounce rates. And this is something you might see if you have Google Analytics set up on your site. This is specifically from my website, actually. So I have this just to illustrate that data holds clues, but it doesn't necessarily always answer your question. If you see here, I have a 65% bounce rate on my page. So that means 65% of people are leaving my website from the home page. And for a lot of people, that could be alarming because you're saying, okay, they're leaving my page. They must not like what they're seeing here. So I need to make changes to my site to make sure that they stay longer or they go deeper in. And that could be true for sure. That could be true, but it's also worth taking into consideration that a high bounce rate could also mean that they are finding exactly what they need. Maybe they're getting to the homepage of the site and they're saying, oh, I've learned everything that I was looking to learn and I'm happy and I can leave now. And so that could be a positive for some products, if you have a one-page site or something like that, having that high bounce rate may be a good thing. So this is just to illustrate that seeing data, if certain percentages, you just really have to do some more deep diving to make sure that what you're looking at is really true and that you're understanding the reasoning behind it and the full journey behind it. And so usually we don't kind of just go into our analytics and just look and try to pull out things just randomly. Usually we start with a specific question or problem statement that has been given to us. And so here we see here that only 3% of orders are mobile. And so that's kind of some data that we maybe pulled out from our analytics to see how many people are ordering with mobile. And the problem statement that they came to me with as a designer is how can we increase the mobile orders? So that's the problem that they've given me. They want me to redesign this app and they want me to increase mobile orders. I could take that as a designer and just say, okay, I'm going to redesign the app how I see fit and see, and, you know, just through my mind, try to figure out what I think is going to be best for increasing mobile orders. And that might work. But what may be a better method is to do some user interviews and see why people are not using the app. So I could sit, you know, around the coffee shop post-COVID world, and I could sit and interview some of the customers that come in and ask them, how often do you use the mobile app? And so for this case, this user said about once a month, which is kind of slow. So I could ask a follow-up question of what features would make you use this app more often? And they said, I think I would use it more often if I gained rewards points for each order. And so that's an interesting insight that maybe I didn't consider before, that we need to maybe add a feature to incentivize people to come to the app again. And so I could take that back to my leadership and say, okay, we need to add a rewards feature immediately. And because one user said that would be a good idea, but what's really going to bolster my case even more to add this feature is to do some follow-up research on that. So I asked the question of, would you be more likely to use the app if incentivized? I sent out a mass survey and I got the response from first-time customers that they said yes. So that's looking pretty positive. And then I got another response when I surveyed returning customers, and they said 88% of them said yes. So that's good. We want to keep our loyal customers returning. And so it's looking like this is maybe a good feature to explore some more with some design. So I do some prototyping, I do some testing, and I add that rewards feature, and I'm able to do some user testing, some A/B testing. And after doing that, I can see that 52% more people ordered via mobile, which was our ultimate goal of what we wanted to do. We wanted to increase mobile orders. So we did that. And we also had a byproduct of increasing same-day visits. So that's always good because we have people returning and spending more money at our coffee shop, which is great. And we had another byproduct of adding customer satisfaction points by 2 points. So we increased that, which is always good because now people have a more positive view of our brand, which is always great. So by doing this, I not only, took that feature, I got more data on, if it's actually good to implement. And then I have now validated by testing that this feature is going to be something good to add. So I can take these numbers to my leadership and say, I've tested this feature, I have the data and the numbers already to back this up, that this is going to be good for us to spend development time on and spend money to implement on. So having that data is really just going to make a more compelling case versus saying, okay, this one user thought it would be a good idea, or I thought this would be a cool feature, I just thought it would be nice to have. Having these hard numbers is really going to help convince people and make a compelling case for your features when you want to add features that really help improve that user experience and help improve your products. So just looking at how we use data throughout the process, we identified the patterns. That was how we got the 3% of knowing that only 3% of people are doing mobile orders. We analyzed the data by doing our interviews and surveys to inform our design and point us in a direction of getting that rewards implemented. And then we validated that rewards program by, doing some testing and validating that this is going to have the results that we intended of increasing mobile orders. So as we kind of wrap up, I wanted to give a couple more examples of how we could identify certain patterns. So if you saw some data that 68% of your users repeat their orders from the last session, that's good not to know, because perhaps you can create a feature for them to show the last order on the home screen so that they can just easily take that order and reuse it. If that's something they're going to keep doing. And you can tell by, I think Uber Eats recently implemented things like that. So you can tell that they're really looking at their user data, and they are taking that and, making improvements to their app to make the user experience more seamless. And so another pattern you may see is that during the November, the top search is pumpkin spice latte. And that's a time-based one. You can see only in November is it pumpkin spice latte. So we don't need to promote it all year round, but during the month of November, we may want to highlight that the pumpkin spice latte is here and that we have a shortcut to order so that people can easily order it and they don't have to sit here and search for it and hunt for it. And then another pattern that you may see is, a bunch of one-star reviews, or maybe even just one, where they just say worst experience ever, and it's very vague. And maybe you're just like, I'm gonna just ignore this because it's probably just some disgruntled person. And it can be sometimes, but I just wanted to highlight that sometimes this is the form that your feedback or your data is coming in, is just a really vague one-star review. And it doesn't necessarily always require you to dig deeper, but it is worth digging deeper a lot of the time, because you want to make sure, even if it's just one person that said this, why did they have a bad experience? And is this representative of other people's experience that maybe they just weren't passionate enough to say so? So it's really something that is worth looking into, at least. And if you see by using other data methods that, it's just that one person, then it is. But it's always good to kind of double check and use other methods to make sure that we're getting even the squeaky wheels and trying to make sure that everyone's having the best experience possible. And so some closing thoughts that I have are just to remember that there are real people behind the data. If we're collecting especially quantitative data, it's just a bunch of numbers, but there are people behind that number. So you want to make sure that you're being a good steward of that data and being responsible in your data collection and transparent. And you want to make sure that you're being an advocate for your users always. And it's always a good thing to become an expert on the data of your users so that you can become more familiar, and it's going to help you identify those patterns more easily. As you know more and more about your users, you'll be able to rattle off those statistics when needed. If you're in a meeting and someone says this, you can really be comfortable to say, well, actually our analytics say this, or we had interviews and they said this. I think that's always a good thing, to become an expert on the data of your users. And yeah, so that is conclusion to my presentation.
That was great.
Do you have any questions? Thank you.
I have questions.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm in the marketing world. That's my main background. And secondary to that, I do a lot of very amateur graphic design work. I think I told you I used Canva, which has rocked my world with the new improvements they've made with photoshopping much easier than it was before. But all that to say, I'm rambling. You talked about surveys, and have you found, what's the best way that you've found to get feedback on surveys? Because sometimes people are so I'm someone who whenever I see a survey pop up, I'm I want to participate in it because I know that company needs feedback. But are there any incentives or things that you've used in the past to get people to take the survey that have worked especially well so that you can get that information?
Let's see. I mean, you always have, I guess it depends on your audience for the survey. So you always have, sometimes you can, if it's a company survey, I'm sure people are familiar with this. If it's a company survey, you can try to get the managers on board to make sure that they're promoting that to their people and making sure that they have a deadline to complete that survey. So that's always pretty a good method. But if it's like the general public, it's tough because, you know, I do think incentives work, but you can't always do like a monetary incentive, which is totally understandable. But even if it's just, you know, I don't know, it's just worth like getting creative and saying, you know, maybe we'll give you a promotion, like we'll list, you know, your name on our website, or we'll give you rewards points, or, you know, if you can give like Starbucks gift cards and things like that. I know some companies do that, and I'm sure it works for them.
Maybe it's like a free membership or something that you just, I'm thinking for this post, because it's hard to get feedback. We have a huge audience, but getting feedback is like very hard. And talking to people directly right now can be even more difficult, of course, because you're not seeing people face to face. But I'm thinking like, maybe it's like we give them a free membership to our space or something for a month. And anywho, and then does anybody else have any questions? I have another one, but I want to let somebody else go.
I kind of have a similar question that you just had, so I'm listening in. Keep it up.
So my other one question was, I think everybody knows Google Analytics in terms of, I mean, I do, that's the go-to one. Are there, and I've never done a research on any other platforms or tools that you've used that you feel strongly that they might be better than Google Analytics, or that you would recommend?
That's a really good question. I'm actually not a huge fan of Google Analytics. I really don't look at mine that often. I looked at it for this presentation and it was fine. I use Squarespace for my website, and they have a pretty powerful analytics that really fits my needs. So that's what I use. I'm sure there's like WordPress specific ones that I'm just not familiar with. And then of course, Google Analytics works on those as well. And yeah, it's kind of tough because it's really specific to the product that you're using. So like websites will use Google Analytics or use Squarespace, but I know we used to use like AppC for some of our applications, but I think that got bought out by ServiceNow, so unfortunately it's no longer an option. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of really specific to what your needs are, and it's just kind of worth just doing that research and finding out what your specific. It's good to come in with a set. I think it's good to come in with a set of things that you already want to know, because then you can kind of weed out anything that's not going to give you that answer, which I think is really important.
Gotcha. So that leads me to another question, something you said. I'm glad you said you use Squarespace, because I feel like if you use Squarespace, I should be using Squarespace. Because personally, I have a number of sites. I'm always like getting domains. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do something with this domain someday. And I always go to Squarespace. Of all the sites, in terms of basically design and user experience and like the ability to manipulate, I mean, I feel like WordPress and Squarespace are two of the most popular ones, but for some reason, whenever I'm looking for a platform, I always still struggle with this, and I always come down to Squarespace because I feel like I just like it better visually, and the way to manipulate it is all visually in terms of what, you know, I'm a very visual person. So what is your recommendation for platforms? Like, what are some of the top platforms you have used in the past?
Yeah, I'm definitely a big Squarespace fan, so I totally agree with you there. It is very visual for me, and that's so much easier for me to organize everything. I honestly hate WordPress. Sorry, anyone, if you're using WordPress. I've done a few recently, and I'm just like, I cannot. It just, I really gets overly complicated, and it just doesn't give me the results as easily as just in Squarespace. So that's my thoughts on that. I'm trying to think if there's any. I know there's
Webflow compared to Webflow.
Oh, what was that?
I was going to add. I thought you were moving on, but compared to Webflow too, I wondered what you thought about those.
Webflow. I'm not familiar. Is that another one of the website?
Yeah, and it seems like overly complicated, but I thought it was just me. So I was. It's kind of encouraging to hear you both say that Squarespace is the way you've gone.
Yeah, I would say like Squarespace is, if you're a Canva fan, then I think Squarespace is probably the closest as you're going to get to website building, like a Canva more predetermined, and it's going to look good as you drop it on the thing without a lot of customization and, you know, everything like that. I know Wix is another one, and
Yeah,
I've seen a
that's what I
lot of
was
people
gonna
use
say.
them. Yeah.
I think I could be wrong, but I feel like Wix is closer to Squarespace layout than
Mm.
WordPress is, but I was always again come down to Squarespace.
Yeah.
So,
Same.